She was running, breathless and terrified, dodging through the alleyways of a city that pulsed with life, yet it felt cold and unforgiving. The rain poured down, slicking the pavement and blurring the distant lights, transforming the bustling streets into a hazy dream. For Sophie, that dream had turned into a nightmare. She didn't even know how she'd landed in this mess. Just days ago, she was an ordinary girl, lost in the bustling rhythm of life, ambitions swirling like the rain around her. But now she was known as the girl with no name. The law was hot on her trail, drawing closer with every heartbeat. It was a chaos of sirens and shouts that electrified the air around her, each sound echoing the truth she desperately wished to outrun. Sophie barely registered the shadow looming behind her in the murky depths of the alley. She turned sharply, breath hitching in her throat. The dim light barely illuminated the figure, tall, broad-shouldered, and an enigma wrapped in mystery. He commanded, but it didn't feel like an order. It felt like a lifeline thrown amidst a raging storm. A part of her wanted to bolt, to flee even further into the shadows, but another part, a flicker of a stubborn hope, urged her to stay. As the shadows danced on the brick walls around them, their eyes met, and for the first time she felt someone was actually looking at her. Not at the girl running from the law, not at a faceless fugitive, but as Sophie. The darkness that had blanketed her life flickered like an old film reel, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. She was on borrowed time. He asked, his voice as deep as winter nights. The question hung in the air like an unspoken promise. I don't, she stammered, the weight of her name heavy in the silence. The truth was, she had forgotten. Not just her name, but who she was, with the past quickly dissolving into the chaos around her. It didn't matter how she got here, or who was chasing her, it was about survival. Yet staring into the pools of his eyes, she felt a flicker of recognition swell inside her. "Listen," he said, stepping closer, his voice lowering, "you need to trust me." For a heartbeat, the knowledge of trust felt foreign. It was a word she had kept locked away, too fragile to touch after everything that had happened. But desperation was a powerful force, and perhaps this stranger was her only way out. The question tore from her lips before she could think. "Because I know what it feels like to be lost." His eyes hinted at stories untold, painful histories that spun lives off course just as hers had been. Silence hung heavy as they stood together, two lost souls in a cruel world. "I'm Adam," he said finally, and for a fleeting moment the tension around them melted away, simple words that turned the darkness of the alley into a fragile sort of refuge. She whispered, her shoulders tinged with tension. "You get out of this city, lay low." Adam's gaze softened, his resolve strong. "You need a name, a new start." Sophie felt a flicker of warmth taking root amidst the chaos. A name. It was just one word, but for her it signified hope. It was a promise of who she could be, free from the chains of her past. In that moment, the air thick with the scent of rain and impending danger, she made a choice. "Sophie," she said softly, a smile breaking through the weight of her thoughts. Adam looked at her as if she had just transformed before his eyes, a phoenix rising from ash. "Sophie," he repeated, testing the name, liking the way it felt. "Then that's who you'll be." Without looking back, they slipped deeper into the labyrinth of the city, two silhouettes moving against the backdrop of a neon-lit night. Sophie's heart raced with possibilities unspoken, even as the threat loomed like a dark cloud overhead. She had taken on a new identity, and with it, a flicker of hope ignited in the pit of her stomach. She felt alive for the first time in far too long. As they navigated the darkness, the adrenaline coursing through her veins, Sophie began to recall the life she had left behind. Days spent meandering through art galleries, late-night coffee runs, laughter echoed in worn-out cafes. Memories flooded her mind, a surreal movie reel that looked familiar yet distant. But as they ducked down another alley, a muffled shout erupted somewhere behind them. Her heart dropped. Adam urged, sensing her fear. They turned a corner, and Sophie felt the tears prick the corners of her eyes. She had lost so much, and now, not only was she running from the law, but she was also running from the life she once knew. The city felt like an endless maze, twisting and turning, reflecting the turmoil within her. Hours crawled by as they fled, a relentless chase that spiraled into the early hours of dawn. Eventually, Adam led her to a long-abandoned building that still stood defiant against the encroaching cityscape. A bit rusty, maybe, but it whispered of protection, a sanctuary, if only for a moment. They settled quietly into a corner of the space, and Adam rummaged through an old backpack he carried, pulling out 2 cans of soup, a flashlight, and a couple of water bottles. The hunger clawing at her stomach suddenly overwhelming, Sophie took what he offered, but as she ate, she could sense the weight of the moment pressing against her. "So tell me about yourself, Sophie," Adam asked, his voice a warm flame amidst the icy uncertainty. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself remember. "I was studying painting," she began, her eyes glazing over memories of canvases bursting with color. "I was always in love with art. It was my world." She faltered as the sobs began to bubble up. The memories of a hasty confrontation, the chaos that spiraled out of control, the betrayal that changed everything. "What do you do when everything just?" He reached over, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You build it back. You start with something small." The weight of his words settled around her. He wasn't just any stranger. He had become her lifeline, and every moment they spent together wove a thread of connection between them. As the light outside began to shift, hints of sunlight spilling into the cracks of the building, she felt the courage simmering within. The world, even in its chaos, was still alive, vibrant just beyond these walls. "You know," Adam said, breaking into her thoughts, "we can't stay here forever." His eyes held hers, firm and unwavering. "We will find a way to reclaim your truth." With every word, her fears began to recede, replaced by flickers of determination. Perhaps it wasn't just about hiding anymore. Somewhere deep down, she yearned to face the whirlwind of what had happened, to reclaim who she was, not just as Sophie, but as someone who could rise, stronger and more resilient than before. As they planned their next move, she found the spark in her spirit reigniting a fire born from the ashes of despair. Together with Adam, she saw flickers of a new life, not just an escape, but a path leading back to herself. Each quiet hour that passed reinforced their bond, the trust slowly solidifying like concrete. Trust once foreign and frightening began to feel like home. They uncovered layers of each other's lives through stories and laughter, learning to stand tall in the face of fear. It was a fragile but beautiful thing, the formation of a new family born out of chaos. Days turned into weeks, and though the shadows of the loss still loomed, Sophie learned to reshape her fear into courage. She found solace not by hiding behind the walls, but by painting the life she wanted with the strokes of resilience and creativity she had once embraced. The darkness that chased her now became her canvas, and with each passing day, a new name swelled with strength. Finally, they stood together against the breaking dawn, sunlight surging through the windows, breaking the last barriers of despair. She was Sophie, and this world chaotic, yet beautiful, was ready to be faced head-on. Turning to Adam, she felt gratitude swell within her. "Thank you," she breathed, the words almost reverent. "You gave me back my name." With a confident smile, he nodded. "Now you need to hold on to it. This is just the beginning, Sophie." And as they stepped out into the brightening day, the both of them pressed forward away from the chaos in search of hope, fueled by trust and bound by an unbreakable connection that could weather any storm. The rain poured hard that night, a relentless downpour that turned the streets into a shimmering, dark pool beneath the glow of broken streetlights. Sophia crouched low behind a dumpster, hands trembling, heart racing. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer, hunting her down. She didn't have a name in this city, not really. Just a shadow, a ghost slipping through the night, running from the law. Just days earlier, she had a life, dreams of traveling, making art, finding love. But all that crumbled in a blink like fragile glass. One wrong turn, one innocent mistake that twisted into chaos. A friend needed a favor, and favor turned into a nightmare. Now she was lost in the shadows with nothing but fear to guide her. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, trying to calm the storm raging inside her. Escape had become her lifeline. But even as she ran, the memories would chase her, gnawing at her mind. Her world had been painted in vibrant colors, and now it felt like everything faded to gray. A soft rustle broke her thoughts, pulling her back into the moment. She tensed, ready to bolt, but then a figure stepped into the alleyway. A man tall and rugged with deep-set eyes that held secrets she couldn't even begin to understand. He paused, scanning the area, the tension in the air crackling like static electricity. He called out, his voice booming through the night. Panic surged through Sophia. She edged deeper into the shadows, heart pounding like a drum. She couldn't get caught. She wouldn't let them take her, but the man stepped closer, the light hitting his face just right. There was something familiar in his expression. He wasn't just searching for her, he was searching for understanding, for connection. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm not here to hurt you." She hesitated, studying him. He seemed genuine despite the wild-eyed look of urgency. Maybe it was the ghost of desperation she recognized in him. It stirred something deep inside, something she thought she had lost. Her voice came out shaky, a whisper barely louder than the sound of the rain. "Because we're not so different," he replied. "I've seen what hiding does to a person. My name's Ryan." It was a moment too soft against the harsh reality encircling them. Part of her ached to take a step toward him, to find solace in his words, but fear tethered her in place. He asked, his eyes locked onto hers as if piercing through her defenses. For a split second, she felt the weight of his gaze peel back the layers she hid behind. "You don't have to stay here, Sophia." The rain drummed louder, drowning out the chaos, the screams of sirens, the busy life just beyond their alley. She felt a flicker of hope, wild and untamed. What if she could be free? What if there was a way out? "I don't even have a name anymore," she murmured, the pain spilling out like rainwater pooling at her feet. He gestured toward her, something fierce ignited in his eyes. "You always did, Sophia." And in that moment, when the world felt like it was collapsing around her, something shifted. Maybe it was the conviction in his voice, or maybe it was simply fatigue from running. Either way, she felt something awaken within her. "All right," she said quietly, a decision crawling out from the depths of her despair. Relief washed over Ryan's features as he stepped closer, reaching out a hand. "Follow me." With a shaky breath, she took his hand. The warmth enveloped her cold fingers, grounding her. Together, they stepped away from the confines of the darkness, shadows dissolving into the unknown, the alleyway behind them disappearing into the chaos of the city. Ryan led her through a maze of streets, each turn revealing a story, a quicker heartbeat, and a hope that seemed to pulse between them. They walked in silence, but not in solitude. It felt as if every strum of her heart pulled them closer together, intertwining their fates amid the chaos surrounding them. She finally asked, breaking the silence that felt too heavy to bear. "I know about running. I know about fear," he replied, voice steady. "I've been hiding too, Sophia." His admission hung in the air, a fragile thread weaving their stories together. In that small moment, they were kindred spirits, two lost souls navigating through a world filled with shadows. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a rundown motel at the edge of the city, its flickering neon sign buzzing like an old lullaby. Ryan opened the door to a small, dimly lit room, an instant sanctuary from the storm outside. Once inside, the tension began to ebb. She sank into a dusty chair by the window, feeling the weight of her body finally come to rest. Ryan moved to the small table, pulling out an old map and spreading it across the surface. He pointed to different areas. Sophia reached out, tracing the lines. This was the first time she felt like the future held more than just a flight from fear. She asked, the uncertainty still clinging to her voice. "Anywhere but here," he said with a smirk, his confidence easing the knot in her stomach. "It's a big country. We can head north. There are places where people won't look for us, places we can start fresh." In that moment, her heartbeat steadied. She couldn't hide forever. The past was no longer an anchor, but rather a distant star waiting to be navigated. She searched his face, yearning for some certainty. He was quiet for a heartbeat, eyes flashing with something unrecognized. "I'll take care of you. I made a promise to myself." A sharp pang of gratitude shot through her. She was no longer just a girl with no name. She could reclaim who she was, redefine her life with every choice she made alongside him. "Thank you, Ryan," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. As night turned to dawn, they formed a connection forged from shared struggles, stamped in the silence of the room. Conversations slipped in and out, weaving their lives together like a patchwork quilt. Ryan shared fragments of his past, tales of getting lost in the wrong crowd, choices that spiraled out of control, and how redemption had come knocking on his door when he least expected it. Sophia revealed her own dreams, the yearning for a life filled with colors and joyful chaos, the art school, the gallery she had once envisioned. Each word painted a picture of who she wanted to be, and with every stroke she began to reclaim her name. Days passed, each one a new chapter wrapped in the laughter they shared and the stories they told. They became partners in crime, but instead of running from the law, they were running towards something greater, their truths. Sophia could feel the pieces of herself falling back into place, a mosaic being crafted from the debris of despair. Ryan didn't just help her find a name, he helped her find herself. As they made plans to leave the city behind, a creeping sense of fear lingered. The law was still out there, hunting her, waiting for a chance to pull her back into the darkness she had fought so hard to escape. "We can do this," Ryan reassured her one night, his hand resting gently on her shoulder as they prepared to leave. "We're stronger together." She nodded, a surge of adrenaline pushing through her veins. Every step they took toward freedom felt like an embrace, the warmth of a new beginning wrapping around her heart like a comforting blanket. Soon enough, they found themselves on the open road, the sun casting golden rays across the horizon. The landscape shifted with every mile, a tapestry of fields and mountains unfolding before them. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the horizon held promise instead of fear. Ryan turned to her, a smile breaking across his face. "This is it, a fresh start." Sophia felt the weight of her past ease away like old scars healing. She asked, a tinge of worry still lingering, "Then we'll keep running." "But together," he said, voice steady and reassuring, a vow that reverberated in her heart. And as the miles stretched on, worry faded into defiance. They were rewriting their stories, living in the now, and for the first time, Sophia felt a spark of her own resilience. The girl with no name was reclaiming herself, inch by inch, step by step. Days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, they forged their lives anew. Sophia began to paint again, using the colors swirling inside her to create art filled with life and possibility. She transformed emotions into liquid strokes, claiming her past as a piece of a larger story, one that felt vibrantly alive. Ryan stood by her side, working tirelessly toward his own dreams, blending their lives together onto the canvas of their shared future. They found community, support, and laughter, a family born from the ashes of despair. Each brush stroke brought clarity, each conversation deepened understanding, and every shared moment solidified their bond. No longer shadows, they became vibrant figures shaping their destinies, thriving in a world painted with hope. But as they chased dreams, the specter of the law still loomed in the background, a reminder of shadows that always linger just out of sight. One day, while they were out in the studio, the door swung open. Two figures stepped inside, faces grim, badges gleaming in the light. The chill rushed through the room as Sophia's heart dropped. She felt the walls closing in, fear rising again like a tidal wave ready to crash. "Sophia Bennett," one of them called out, voice crisp and unwavering. In that moment, time slowed, memories flooded back, and it felt like a cruel twist of fate. But beside her stood Ryan, his fierce gaze cutting through the tension, a silent promise binding them together. "You don't need to say anything," he stepped forward, voice strong and steady. "She's not who you think she is." Sophia held her breath, every fiber of her being echoing back his words. This wasn't the end. It was simply another chapter, one in which she could finally stand up and reclaim her truth. "Let's talk," she found her voice, a quiet determination rising within her. In that charged moment, she felt the chains of her past begin to shatter. No longer defined by fear or the judgments of others, she embraced who she was becoming, Sophia, the girl who reclaimed her name, her life, and the audacity to fight for her freedom. Together, with Ryan by her side, they stepped into the light, ready to face whatever the world threw their way. The horizon was calling, a new world waiting just beyond the shadows, and for the first time, Sophia understood that every step forward was hers to take. The girl with no name was becoming a woman with a story she would write on her own terms. The rain fell relentlessly as flashes of lightning illuminated the alley. A figure crouched in the shadows, heart pounding, breath hitching in her throat. Clara hugged her knees, trying to vanish into the damp brick wall behind her. The sound of sirens echoed in the night, cutting through the storm, a relentless reminder that she was being hunted. Just days ago, she was an ordinary girl living in a cramped apartment, painting her dreams in swirls of color across the canvas. But now, her life teetered on the edge of disaster. A series of reckless choices had dragged her into a world where her name, once a source of pride, became a weight she couldn't bear. She was known only as the girl with no name, hiding from the law for crimes she didn't commit yet felt responsible for. The last night she recalled clearly was a party that spiraled out of control. A moment of laughter drowned in the clink of bottles, friends and fleeting faces swirling like smoke. Among them was Tyler, her best friend, a wild spirit who was always getting them in trouble. That night he had coaxed her into a game, one that led them to a back room where something dark unfolded. She could still hear the pop of flashbulbs, the raucous laughter turning to screams. And now, days later, as she shivered in the cold rain, Clara felt her world collapsing into shadows. She didn't have a plan, only desperation fueling her instincts. The law was looking for her, a headline on news sites describing a girl they believed to be a criminal, all because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her heart raced as she heard footsteps approaching. She pressed back against the wall, hoping to blend into the shadows when a tall figure stepped into view. At first, panic surged through her, but then she caught a glimpse of his face-hard lines softened by a weary smile. "Hey," he asked, his voice cutting through the chaos of sirens and the storm. His eyes held concern that felt genuine, inviting her to trust him. Clara shot back, fear coursing through her veins. She was tired, scared, and fraught with uncertainty. She didn't want to involve anyone else in her nightmare. "I can help you," he said gently, stepping closer, hands raised in surrender. "My name's Alex. I know this city." Clara hesitated. She was exhausted, and the thought of running again made her dizzy. Desperation clawed at her, and she took a shakily breath. She asked, skepticism threading through her voice. She didn't even know this man. "Yeah, help," he said, urgency seeping into his tone. "You have no idea how to survive out here, do you?" And just like that, something deep inside her said yes. She may have not known who she was anymore, but she knew she couldn't face this storm alone. "Fine," she relented, pushing up from the ground. "I won't," he promised, eyes locked onto hers. As they moved out of the alley, a chill ran down Clara's spine, but she followed him, her breaths catching up with her racing thoughts. Alex led her through winding streets, past bright neon signs that flickered like distant stars in the stormy night. They ducked into a side entrance of an old building, creeping through the back hallways until they reached a sparsely furnished but warm room. "This is my hideout," he said, glancing over his shoulder. Clara sank onto a ragged couch, heart still racing. The room felt like a sanctuary, even if it was hardly inviting. Here, surrounded by the scent of damp wood and fresh paint, she could breathe again. She glanced around, noticing the art scattered on the walls. It looked similar to her own, vibrant colors splashed in reckless abandon. "Hey, you're an artist," he noted, catching her gaze. "Used to be," she muttered, shrugging. He asked, curiosity glinting in his eyes as he leaned against the wall. She hesitated, vulnerability creeping in. "Because I'm running from mine," she finally admitted, the weight of the truth spilling from her lips. "I got caught up in a mess I didn't create." "Well, here you can be whoever you want," he said, sincerity weaving through his words. "Safe." The word washed over her like a balm. It felt foreign yet tantalizing, a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. She asked, fear creeping back into her heart at the thought. "We'll figure it out," Alex assured her, stepping closer. "They can't catch what they can't see, but you have to trust me. You've got to let me help." Clara looked deep into his eyes, searching for the lies she expected but found only honesty and a glimmer of something else, an understanding. I don't know," she began, but the truth was she felt tethered to him. Maybe he was her way out. "I want to be me again." "Then we'll make that happen," he said, determination tightening his expression. She frowned, confusion clouding her thoughts. "A name," he clarified. "You're not just running from your past, you're stepping into your future. You need to reclaim who you are." Clara felt her world spin, her identity slipping further from her grasp. "I've." The name slipped from her tongue, soft yet strong, as if it held magic. "Then Clara it is," he declared with a wide grin. "From now on, you're Clara." The warmth of his affirmation enveloped her like sunlight breaking through clouds. In that moment, she felt the fractures of her shattered self start to mend piece by piece. "Clara," she said again, tasting the word as if it were a melody. It held power, but with that name came doubt. She asked, insecurity creeping back in. "Failure is part of the journey," Alex said, his gaze steady. "It's not about avoiding chaos, it's about learning to dance with it." Their eyes locked in a charged moment where something unspoken passed between them. Clara realized he wasn't just her savior, he was someone who believed in her. The days bled into one another as they settled into their routine. Clara learned to navigate the city with Alex guiding her, teaching her how to hide in plain sight. They visited busy markets, mingling with crowds, blending in, where she could disappear from prying eyes. Days spent sketching in the park, where she unleashed her suppressed creativity. It felt as if the paint flowed from her soul, bringing her sketches to life. Every night she would sit with Alex, sharing snippets of her life, her dreams, and the pieces of herself she dared to reclaim. His presence felt grounding, his laughter echoed like harmony in the storm. Trust blossomed, wrapped tightly around their growing friendship. Yet the shadows didn't vanish entirely. The fear was still there, lingering like a ghost behind each turn. Deep down, Clara knew she was living on borrowed time. One misstep, one slip, and the law could unravel everything they had built. The fear came rushing back one afternoon as they splashed through puddles in the park, laughing like children. But then the world shifted. Clara's laughter faded when she spotted two officers in crisp uniforms approaching from the opposite side of the path. Her heart raced and panic surged like wildfire. She gasped, pulling Alex's arm. He blinked, confusion washing over his face. She yelled, adrenaline surging as they darted through the trees, the footsteps of the officers echoing behind them. Alex shouted, veering off into a dense thicket. They ducked behind low-hanging branches, breathless, listening as footsteps faded into the distance. Clara's heart raced, her hands shaking. "Lay low," Alex replied quickly, eyes scanning their surroundings. "They won't catch us if we disappear into the crowd." Fear coursed through her, but she also felt alive, the thrill pushing her instincts into overdrive. They darted toward the nearest exit, blending back into the bustle of city life where the colors swirled around them in the chaos of vibrancy. Clara whispered, each breath trembling as they slipped into a crowded cafe. "I don't think so," Alex assured her, glancing around. "Just stay calm, okay?" As they settled into an isolated corner, Clara took a moment to breathe, the steam from coffee mugs curling in the air. "I can't keep running like this," she said, fear edging into her words. "I'm not cut out for this." "You'll be okay," he promised, his hand resting over hers. "We're in this together, we just need a plan." His words wrapped around her tightly. She was tired of hiding, tired of running. Instead, she felt something shift, a defiance blooming within her. "You're right. And you won't," he said, resolve pouring from his voice. "But we need to confront your past." Clara met his gaze, determination bubbling beneath the surface. The next few days were filled with careful planning and sleepless nights. They mapped out every detail of Clara's past. The incident, the miscommunication, the truth that had spiraled into chaos. She gathered the courage, confronting each layer of her story, painful memories twisted into a tapestry of resilience. Finally, the day arrived. It was time to face the law that had chased her down. Clara stood before a small building, fear coiling tightly in her stomach as they approached. The walls felt imposing, but by her side was Alex, who embodied strength. "Whatever happens in there, you have to remember, you're not just running anymore. You're reclaiming your life," he said, voice steady. Clara nodded, determination shining in her eyes. They stepped inside, the atmosphere buzzing with tension. Questions echoed from officers, curiosity and judgment pouring over her like icy water. But as Clara spoke her truth, confidence began to replace hesitation. "I didn't do anything wrong," she asserted, her voice strong as she recounted her story, faced the accusations. The officers exchanged glances, a flicker of understanding sparkling in their eyes. Clara's heart raced, but she held her ground, every word a brushstroke reclaiming her identity. Slowly, the walls began to crumble. The officers listened, and their expressions softened. Clara's voice poured out, the girl with no name slowly becoming the woman she wanted to be. The fear she had carried for so long started to dissipate as she took the reins of her narrative. Eventually, after what felt like eternity, the lead officer stepped forward. "We'll look into what you've said," he said, a faint glimmer of trust growing. A rush of relief washed over her, sending warmth through her entire being. She could almost see the shadow of her old self fading into the background. But as Clara turned to leave, she cast one last glance at Alex. Relief washed over her. "I did it." He grinned, pride radiating from him. As they stepped back into the daylight, it felt like a world of endless possibility opened before them. Sunlight sparkled off the wet pavement, the city pulsing with life, illuminating the road ahead. "I'm ready," Clara declared, a newfound strength surging through her. And as they walked side by side, Clara realized she was no longer a girl with no name, but a woman reclaiming her story, one vibrant brushstroke at a time. She was Clara, strong, alive, and ready to paint her future. With every step forward, she embraced the life that awaited her, knowing that together they would face whatever came next. She was running again, heart pounding in rhythm with her footsteps against the rain-soaked pavement. The streets shimmered under the flickering lights, a kaleidoscope of reflections as chaos swirled around her. Sirens wailed in the distance, piercing through the night air like a knife cutting through fog. But Sarah didn't have the luxury to think about the why or how. All she could focus on was the sound of the law closing in a relentless, haunting chase that kept her feet moving faster with every beat of her heart. Just days before, she'd been an ordinary girl living an ordinary life. Now, she was nothing more than an elusive shadow in a city that felt unrelenting and cruel. The night that changed everything was still fresh in her mind. It had started with laughter, a celebration beneath the neon glow of a bar, surrounded by her friends. Just one drink, she had told herself, but one turned into three and the world spun faster. They had laughed, danced, and lost track of time. But in that haze, a misunderstanding ignited a brutal fight sparked by a careless word. In the chaos, she made the worst mistake of her life. She grabbed a bottle not meant for her, only to see it land on someone's head, leaving that person unconscious and entire lives shattered. And so began the chase. With her face plastered across every news outlet as the girl who had allegedly attacked someone brutally, she became a ghost, slipping through alleyways and hiding from a justice system that seemed to have no compassion. She had no name anymore, not really. She was known only as the dangerous girl with no identity. Sarah ducked into an alley, breath hitching in her throat, desperately trying to disappear into the night. The rain masked her tears as she thought about her life, the dreams she had, the plans that had seemed solid just hours before. Now, all she had was the weight of guilt and the fear of being caught. Desperation tasted bitter on her tongue. That's when she heard footsteps echoing behind her, heavy and deliberate. She pressed herself back against the damp wall, praying to remain invisible. The figure moved closer, illuminated by a flickering streetlight. It was a man, tall and broad, with an intensity that drew her in against her better judgment. He called out. His voice radiated through the rain, sharp and commanding. For a moment, Sarah's instinct was to run, but something in his tone held her still. Was he friend or foe? She felt a strange need to let him in, despite the fear coiling in her gut. She shouted, attempting to sound defiant, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Of course you do," he replied calmly. "Look where you are, you can't keep running forever." That name, Jake, it felt solid, trustworthy. It was all too tempting, yet distrust lingered like a second skin. Sarah took a breath, weighing her options. The law was closing in, and every moment she hesitated was a moment she could be caught. She challenged, the heat of her anger mingling with fear. "Because I've been where you are," he replied, stepping closer. "I've been hunted too." His honesty struck her like a bolt of lightning. The weight of her reality pressed against her chest. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her find a path back to freedom. She asked, a hint of suspicion still lingering in her voice. "Nothing." "Just trust," he said, a small smile breaking across his face. "And a name would help." For a brief moment, shock washed over her. "A name," he said, his enthusiasm growing. "Reclaim who you are. Before you were the girl running, you were someone else." Sarah hesitated, mind racing. In that instant, she could feel the memories of her past flooding back. She thought of the bright red paint she used to love, the strokes of color that once defined her. "I used to be Sarah," she whispered, the name tasting sweet and sharp on her tongue. "There you go. Sarah fits you perfectly," Jake encouraged, excitement dancing in his eyes. With his encouragement wrapping around her like warmth, Sarah took a deep breath, the weight on her shoulders beginning to lift with each step into the unknown. They slipped out of the alley, blending into the rainy cityscape, becoming just another pair of shadows in a world of chaos. They moved through the city, Jake's presence calming her restless heart. With each step, she was reminded of who she was: Sarah, a young woman who loved to paint, whose heart beat with the pulse of creativity. It felt good to remember. She finally asked, curiosity overpowering her wariness. "To a safe place. Somewhere we can figure this out," he replied, confidence pouring from his every word. As they settled in an old warehouse, the air filled with dust and memories of days gone by, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite. Jake pulled supplies from a tattered backpack: snacks, water, and a sketchbook. "You'll need this," he handed it to her, "to reclaim your voice." She accepted the sketchbook hesitantly, feeling its weight in her hands. A wave of nostalgia washed over her. The thrill of creating had once been a part of her. Now it felt like a distant memory. With a flick of her wrist, she opened to a blank page and sketched her first stroke. The ink flowed like water, capturing the emotions that brimmed beneath her skin. The colors danced in her mind as she lost herself in the act of creation, the chaos of the world fading away. "I knew it," Jake said, a proud smile on his face as he leaned over to watch her work. With each line, she felt pieces of herself reclaim not just name but identity. When she finally looked up, Sarah saw Jake sitting calmly across from her, arms crossed, an encouraging grin etched on his face. She asked, feeling the spark of hope reignite inside, "We need to gather more information about the incident. I know some people who can help," he said, determination simmering in his voice. Fear crept back in at the thought of confronting what had happened, but she found strength in his presence. "I can do this," she whispered, clinging to the fragile courage that had surfaced. Days turned into a blur, marked by whispered conversations and late-night sketches beneath the dim light of the warehouse. Sarah and Jake became partners in a battle neither had anticipated: her fight for freedom and identity, his quest to help her navigate the treacherous waters of a world intent on vilifying her. They found allies who believed in her story, people who had navigated their own struggles, and slowly but surely a plan emerged. With Jake at her side, Sarah began gathering her strength, finding her voice again. But the shadows of doubt lingered at the edges, whispering questions she fought to drown out. "What if they don't believe me?" Yet every stroke of her pencil silenced that voice, reinforcing her resolve to be heard. One evening, as storm clouds gathered overhead, Sarah paced the floor, nerves twisting in her stomach like a storm. She asked Jake, desperation spilling from her lips. "Then we'll find a way to piece it back together," he assured her, stepping closer. "You've come this far." The night of the meeting arrived, anxiety crackling in the air. Sarah dressed carefully, wearing a simple yet vibrant top, a reminder of the life she wanted to reclaim. Jake stood beside her, his presence like a fortress against the storm raging within. As they walked into the crowded room where the department was convening, anxiety clawed at her throat. Officers eyed her, whispers circulating like a wildfire. But she discovered strength in Jake's unwavering gaze, pushing forward despite the whispers. "Thank you for being here, Sarah," one officer said, voice steady yet probing. With each word that filled the air, Sarah felt the weight of judgment loom over her. But she remembered Jake's encouragement. The words spilled from her lips like a dam breaking, each syllable piercing through the tension in the room. She recounted the night, the laughter, the chaos, the regret. Emotions poured forth, colorful strokes painting a picture that spoke of anger, fear, and ultimately hope. As she spoke, she felt the shadows begin to recede, like dawn chasing away the darkness. When she finished, silence enveloped the room. Officers exchanged glances, some reflecting surprise, others contemplation. Then one officer took a step forward. "Thank you for sharing your story, Sarah. Tension dissipated on the exhale, replaced with a newfound sense of freedom she hadn't anticipated. For the first time since the incident, she felt like Sarah again, no longer just a fugitive but a woman reclaiming her life. As they left the room, Jake looked at her, pride lighting his features. "You did it." With every passing day, Sarah continued to rebuild herself. The world might be riddled with chaos, but for the first time she felt grounded. The sketches she once thought represented regrets turned into symbols of resilience and reinvention. Together, they forged a path forward, a partnership driven by hope. The fights weren't over, but the fear of being caught in shadows slowly faded, replaced by the brightness of reclaiming life on her terms. The paintbrush in her hand felt heavy yet comforting. Sarah laughed, the sound ringing through the studio they had created together. She teased. "Yeah," Jake laughed back, a glimmer in his eyes. She grinned, her heart light as she returned to her easel. It didn't matter if the law lingered in the distance. What mattered was the journey she had embarked on, one not defined by mistakes but driven by passion and the relentless pursuit of who she wanted to be. With each stroke of her brush, she transformed the chaos into beauty. Sarah painted her future, knowing that no matter the challenges ahead, she had the power to face them head-on. She lived of light, laughter, and color, and for the first time in an eternity, she felt unapologetically alive. The rain fell in sheets, cold and relentless, drumming against the pavement like a heartbeat that quickened with every step Annie took. She ducked into the shadows of an alley, heart racing, feeling the weight of the city press down on her. The sound of sirens echoed ominously, drawing closer, and she pressed her back against the damp wall, willing herself to blend into the darkness. Just days ago, Annie had been a bright-eyed college student, her future brimming with possibilities. She dreamt of being an artist, painting murals that would add warmth and beauty to the gray world around her. But a chance encounter in a crowded bar had changed everything. A spilled drink, a heated argument, and in that chaos, a man lay on the floor, unconscious from a single blow that had not come from her. The police came, and suddenly she was a fugitive, the girl with no name, a headline plastered across news cycles. It read, reducing her to a label, a monster she didn't recognize. She didn't commit the crime, but in that moment, none of that mattered. All she could think of was disappearing, hiding, anything to avoid the sirens that were now a haunting lullaby in her mind. Her breaths came in short gasps, and she felt the hardness of despair clawing at her throat. She was lost. But as she looked around, a flicker of movement caught her eye. It was a silhouette stepping out from the flickering streetlights, eyes scanning the shadows. He called out, voice deep and firm. Annie tensed, ready to bolt. She didn't need anyone's help, especially not from a stranger. But something in his tone of sincerity mixed with urgency made her pause. "Help," she shot back, skepticism dripping from her words. "Trust me," he replied, stepping closer. She took a cautious step back, the rain soaking her clothes, mingling with the fear that gripped her stomach. "I know you're scared and alone," he replied, his voice softening. "And I also know how to stay hidden." Annie felt torn, the instinct to run battling with an odd sense of hope that flickered within her. She asked, every survival instinct demanding wariness. "Because I've been there," he said, his expression earnest. "I know what it feels like to be lost." She weighed his words, measuring the danger against the desperate need for help. In that moment, with the rain soaking her to the bone and sirens drawing closer, a decision formed. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, taking a step back as if sensing her hesitation. With all the courage she could muster, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Jake led her through the maze of the city, feet pounding on the slick sidewalks, past flickering storefronts that seemed to distort in the rain-soaked chaos. Every corner turned felt like a risk, but Jake walked with a calm assurance that kept her from spiraling into panic. She finally asked, glancing up at him. "Somewhere safe," Jake replied. They ducked into a crowded coffee shop. The familiar scent of roasted beans wrapped around her like a warm blanket, momentarily dousing the chill of fear. They found a spot in the back out of view, and Jake ordered 2 cups of coffee before turning to her, his expression serious. "Now tell me your story," he urged, leaning in closer. Annie hesitated, feeling the tension coiling within her. The truth was raw, painful, a betrayal of the bright future she had envisioned. As she looked into Jake's eyes, she sensed an understanding, a connection urging her to share. I was just having a good time, she began, her voice trembling. It all went wrong so fast. Jake asked softly, his gaze unwavering. Because they think I'm a criminal, she admitted, her voice cracking. But I didn't hurt him. She watched as his eyes narrowed in thought, processing her words. His determination sparked something in her, a flicker of strength that had been buried beneath layers of fear. Over the next hour, as they sipped their coffees and spoke in hushed tones, Annie laid it all bare. Her dreams, her art, the accident, the whirlwind that turned her life upside down. Jake listened carefully, nodding as if he understood every word. You're not a criminal, you just need the chance to tell your side, he said, his voice steady. But you need a name, too. Annie frowned, unsure what he meant. Yes, a name gives you identity, strength. A thought tugged at her mind. Annie, she whispered, tasting the familiarity. Then you are Annie. The warmth of his words wrapped around her, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt since this nightmare began. With that single name, she could reclaim her story. But just as hope began to blossom, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and a couple of police officers stepped inside. Annie's heart plummeted. She froze, instinctively wanting to hide, but Jake caught her eye, a calming presence that held her steady. Let's go, he whispered, taking her hand and guiding her toward a back exit. They slipped out into the alley just as the officers turned to survey the room. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention, but panic clawed at her throat. They darted down the alley, the pounding rain a steady companion. You did great, Jake said, his grip firm on her hand as they continued to run. They made their way through winding streets, and for the first time since the chaos began, Annie felt like she might have a chance, not just to escape, but to reclaim her identity. With each step, she was awakening to the realization that she was no longer alone. As they ducked into another nondescript building, Jake led her up a rickety staircase to a small, cluttered apartment. It was cramped, the scent of old books mingling with freshly brewed tea. This felt rustic, a little like home. This is mine, he said, gesturing around. Annie took a deep breath, letting the fresh air wash over her. She asked, fingers brushing over a dusty sketchbook on the table. Next, we figure out a plan. We need to prepare for what's coming, Jake said, his expression turning serious. Days turned into a blur of urgency. Jake became her anchor in a storm, guiding her through the maze of what she needed to do. Each evening, they pored over details of the night that changed her life. A timeline of events, conversations she needed to revisit, places she could reach out for help. Sometimes, during their brainstorming sessions, they would pause, Jake urging her to draw. At first, the sketches were hesitant, lines shaky and uncertain. But then, as the days went by, the strokes grew bolder with confidence, images of herself reclaiming her story taking form on the pages. Each drawing was a testament to her fight, a step toward understanding who she was beneath the weight of fear. But with every passing day, the shadows of her past loomed larger. The reality of what she was up against settled in a looming confrontation with the law that felt increasingly inevitable. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled outside, tensions rose between them. Annie's voice trembled. What if they just see me as that girl, that monster? Jake stepped closer, grounding her. You're not that girl. You can't let fear decide who you are. The fire in his eyes ignited something inside her. You're right. I have to fight, she concluded, determination creeping back into her chest as the clouds roiled overhead, the thunder mirroring the storm inside her. After days of plotting and planning, the moment arrived. Jake stood beside her as she prepared to confront the truth, his presence a shield against the shadows. Armed with her sketches and the righteous conviction flowing through her veins, she approached the small office where her case would be reviewed. Inside, the room was stark and unwelcoming. Officers leaned over desks, each one seeming to scrutinize her as she walked in. They exchanged glances, a mix of suspicion and curiosity. The weight of the room pressed in on her. Annie, one officer called, gesturing for her to sit. In that moment, the world around her fell silent. It was her opportunity, but fear squeezed her throat tight. She could hardly breathe. Tell us what happened that night, another officer said, voice steady, pen poised ready to jot down notes. Annie took a deep breath, recalling Jake's urging voice, the strength he had imparted. It would be okay, she could do this. She recounted the night from her perspective, the laughter, the argument, the shove, and the subsequent turmoil that left her running. She poured out the feelings of confusion, loss, and despair, her emotions tangible in the room. As she spoke, she saw their expressions shifting and understanding growing in their eyes. She felt a sense of liberation. Their skepticism faded as they listened. When she finished, the silence hung heavy in the space. "Thank you for coming in, Annie," one officer said, nodding slowly. "We'll look into your account." The realization hit her like a warm sunbeam breaking through the clouds. She had done it. She had reclaimed her voice. As she stepped out of that small office, the air felt lighter. Jake stood waiting, arms crossed, a proud smile breaking across his face. "I can't believe I did it," Annie said, a wash of emotion thrumming in her chest. The feeling of freedom surged, amplifying her laughter. She was no longer just running, she was becoming herself again. "We're not done yet," Jake reminded her, mischief sparkling in his eyes. Over the next weeks, as they navigated the murky waters of legal proceedings, Annie felt herself transforming again. She painted, each brushstroke infusing her work with the courage she had fought to reclaim. The desire to express herself bubbled over, and soon, she found herself leading an art show to raise awareness about wrongful accusations and the voices that often go unheard. The night of the show arrived, and as she stood before her pieces, each canvas a reflection of her journey, she felt a rush of pride. The room was filled with people who came to support her mission. She spotted Jake in the front row, encouraging her with a nod, pride radiating from him. "Thank you for being here," she began, voice steady as the crowd's chatter faded. "My name is Annie, and my story for too long was one of shadows and fear." The room erupted in applause, and with each clap she felt the weight lift, reminding her that she was no longer just a girl hiding from the law. She had found her strength, her voice, and her purpose. At that moment, she understood something truly profound. Names carried power, and stories held the ability to transform. She was Annie, a survivor, an artist, a voice for those still trapped in darkness. And as she looked out at the faces around her friends, supporters, those who believed in her journey, she felt something shift within her, a sense of belonging woven into the very fabric of her life. The storm outside had passed, and what stood before her was a vibrant tapestry of human experience, the strength in vulnerability, the beauty in resilience, and the light that could break through even the darkest of nights. With a smile spreading across her face, she took a deep breath and finally felt whole again. The girl with no name had risen, armed with the strength of her untold story and the understanding that she was, above all, more than just a past she had once feared. She was a future she was determined to create. She felt the cold concrete under her fingertips, the dampness soaking through her jeans as she pressed herself against the alley wall. The rain poured down, a relentless torrent that mixed with her rising panic. Sirens echoed in the distance, each wail tightening the knot of fear in her stomach. She was the girl with no name, a ghost hiding from the law, and she had no idea how she'd ended up here. Just days ago, Emma had been a college student, dreaming of a life filled with art and freedom. She spent hours painting vibrant murals in forgotten corners of the city, pouring her heart into each stroke. But one bad night had spiraled everything out of control. A heated argument erupted at a party, a moment of chaos where she found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. After a moment's anger, a girl lay crumpled on the floor, and now Emma was being chased for a crime she hadn't committed. Her breath quickened as she peered around the corner of the alley, hoping to catch a glimpse of the police. Fear of being caught loomed larger than the buildings surrounding her. She needed to find a way out. Panic clawed at her throat. Her mind raced as she thought about what would happen if they found her. She was not just running from the law, she was running from her life. And then she saw him, a tall figure clad in a dark coat, his face half hidden beneath the brim of a hat. He leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed, and something about him sparked a flicker of hope in her. "Hey," he said, voice low but steady. Emma hesitated. "Because if you don't, you're just going to keep hiding in the dark," he replied, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I'm Alex." She studied him, uncertainty swirling in her gut. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Emma felt backed against a wall, both literally and figuratively. She couldn't stay here, not when the police were searching for her. She demanded, "Just to help you. Look, I've been in a similar situation. You don't want to go through this alone," he insisted. "But you have to stop running." Emma felt a jolt of recognition in his words. She was terrified, yes, but also exhausted from hiding. She asked, the sound of sirens beginning to fade, if only slightly. "First, we need to get you somewhere safe. Then we can talk," Alex said. Without waiting for her response, he turned on his heel, already moving toward the street. Taking a deep breath, Emma followed him. She could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, her heart racing faster than her feet. "To a place I know," he replied, glancing back at her. "Trust me." They ducked into another alley, weaving through narrow pathways and hidden corners, distancing themselves from the chaos. As they moved, Emma began to feel a strange comfort in Alex's presence. There was something reassuring about him, like a flicker of hope she thought she'd lost forever. After what felt like an eternity of moving through the labyrinth of the city, they arrived at a modest apartment building that looked somewhat rundown. The door creaked open, revealing a sparse living space filled with the scent of old books and a hint of something cooking on the stove. "Home sweet home," Alex said with a wry smile, stepping inside. Emma stepped in, scanning the small room and feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. There were clothes draped over the back of a worn couch and dishes piled in the sink, but what caught her attention was a sketchbook lying open on a table. Her heart raced again as she approached it. The drawings were filled with vibrant colors and expressive lines, scenes of life and moments captured on paper. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A little," he replied, shrugging. "Art is a good outlet, helps clear the mind." "I used to," she said, feeling a pang of longing in her chest. "Before. Then you should do it again," he said firmly. With that, he handed her the sketchbook, and their fingers brushed together for a brief moment. A spark of electricity coursed through her, igniting the embers of creativity she thought had long gone cold. She took a deep breath and opened the sketchbook, the blank page staring back at her like an invitation. Emma asked, feeling both frightened and invigorated. "We start with your story," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. And so, as the sun began to set outside, Emma found herself unraveling the tangled threads of her life, sharing the pain and confusion that had gripped her since that fateful night. With Alex listening intently, she felt the weight begin to lift. Each word she spoke was a brushstroke, painting the canvas of her truth. "Everything spiraled out of control so quickly," she said, voice shaking. "It was supposed to be just a night with friends, but then it turned into a fight, a stupid argument. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but now." As she spoke, she could see understanding in Alex's gaze. "That moment doesn't define you. You need to take back your narrative. What happened doesn't erase who you truly are," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Feeling emboldened, Emma began to sketch her story, each stroke bringing new life to her emotions. The characters in the drawings transformed into representations of her thoughts, their faces filled with confusion, anger, and ultimately hope. Together, they created a visual journey of the chaos she had lived through. The sound of rain tapping rhythmically against the windows became a soothing background track as they worked side by side. For the first time since she ran, she felt alive. The pages filled with color and light echoed the flickering hope she thought she had lost. But as the night deepened, a shadow of doubt crept in. "What if the police find me?" Emma asked, anxiety clawing at her chest like a feral cat. "I'll help you," Alex promised, standing up to pace around the room. "But you've got to be honest and brave." He paused, turning to meet her gaze. The truth in his words resonated deep within her. Facing the law was terrifying, but staying in hiding felt even more suffocating. Emma had a choice to make. After several days of digging deeper into her emotions through art, they developed a plan. Each step made her more confident, a fire igniting within her that hadn't been there before. Emma was not just the girl hiding anymore. She was becoming someone ready to stand up for herself. They gathered evidence, reached out to witnesses who were at the party that night, and connected with a supportive community. Alex always stood beside her, a constant reminder that she didn't have to walk this path alone. The day they walked into the police station felt surreal, each footstep echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. Emma's heart raced as they approached the front desk. The world seemed to slow down and apprehension washed over her. "Stay calm," Alex whispered, giving her a reassuring nod. "Excuse me," Emma said, her voice shaky yet resolute. The officer eyed her, skepticism etched on their face. "I'm Emma," she said, taking a deep breath. The words hung in the air, a declaration echoing through her mind. She was reclaiming her identity. As she recounted everything that had happened that night, showing her sketches of the events leading up to the fight, the atmosphere began to shift. The officer, initially indifferent, began to listen. With each confirmation and recounting of the story, the skepticism in the officer's eyes faded. Emma felt emboldened. She was no longer just a girl with no name running from a label. She was reclaiming ownership over her life. Hours passed, and when she finally left the station, relief washed over her. Yet she knew this wouldn't be over. There would be more to face. There would be challenges still to come. "You were incredible," Alex said, his pride palpable as they walked back through the bustling streets. "I couldn't have done it without you," Emma replied, her gratitude spilling over. As the days unfolded, she found herself embraced by a community that rallied behind her, people who understood the importance of second chances. They became her support system, each moment a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. The police investigation continued, and although moments of panic would still flare within her, Emma felt herself growing stronger. Each day she painted, capturing the essence of resilience and the beauty of her journey, rebuilding herself layer by layer with each stroke. But as her life began to stabilize, doubts began creeping in again. What if they decided to press charges? What if the system didn't believe her? One afternoon, she approached Alex, the weight of anxiety hanging heavy between them. She whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "You are stronger than you think, Emma," he said firmly. "You've confronted your past, called out the truth, and taken control." His unwavering confidence penetrated the cocoon of fear wrapping around her, and she nodded slowly, resolving to keep fighting for her truth. Days turned into weeks, and her life began to take shape again. The art show she had envisioned, once a distant dream, became a reality. With the support of her new community, she prepared to showcase her journey through art, a representation of her battles, perseverance, and resolution to reclaim her name. On the night of the show, Emma stood before her canvases, the soft light illuminating the vibrant colors that screamed her story. The walls echoed warmth and connection, a clear message of resilience. People filled the space, their expressions curious and intrigued as they stepped closer to view her art. It wasn't just beautiful, it was transformative. She watched as they moved from canvas to canvas, drawn in by the emotions poured into every stroke. As conversations erupted around her, she felt both anxiety and exhilaration. "Emma," someone called, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a local journalist. "Can you share your story?" The room fell silent, and suddenly everything shifted. The spotlight was on her, and what did she have to lose? Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, heart drumming in her chest. "I'm Emma," she began, her voice soft yet steady. "I'm an artist, but I'm also a survivor. This exhibit is my journey, the battle I faced after the night everything changed." As she spoke, she saw nods of understanding ripple through the crowd. She wasn't just sharing her story, she was giving others the courage to share theirs. People stepped forward after, sharing their struggles, connecting through their shared experiences. And in that moment, Emma realized the power of vulnerability. It was a force that transformed a single night of chaos into a cacophony of voices united in strength. By the end of the evening, Emma stood beside Alex, her heart full as applause echoed through the gallery. "I did it," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "You fought for it, Emma," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. With every word they exchanged, she felt the weight of her past dissolve, replaced by an unwavering belief in herself. She was not defined by the girl with no name. She was Emma, an artist, a survivor, and she held the power to reclaim her narrative. And as she stood there, surrounded by the brilliance of her art and the warmth of community, she felt something shift inside her, a light igniting in her soul, a reminder that life is not just about surviving. It's about thriving, creating, and shining brightly in the face of adversity. In that moment, she understood unequivocally. Her journey was just beginning. And no matter the darkness that may linger, she now had the fortitude to turn every shadow into a canvas, transforming her life into a masterpiece. She was huddled in a small, dark corner of an abandoned building, the faint light of the moon filtering through broken windows, casting eerie shadows across the dust-covered floor. Evelyn had been running for days, and her breath was shallow, quickened by fear. The sirens had become a haunting echo in her mind, a constant reminder that she was the girl with no name, the girl hiding from the law. Just a week ago, she was a college student, a painter with dreams as bright as the colors on her palette. But all that changed in a heartbeat. A confrontation at a party escalated far too quickly. Words went unspoken, and suddenly, chaos erupted. In a blur of emotions, someone got hurt, and before she knew it, she was sprinting away, her heart pounding louder than the sirens that now chased her. Evelyn curled deeper into her corner, feeling the cold of the concrete seep into her skin. The rain drummed against the roof like an ominous clock ticking down her time. Panic twisted in her gut, urging her to move. She couldn't be caught. She couldn't be that girl. As she grappled with her fear, the musty scent of old wood filled the air, mingling with the dampness, mixing memories of her once bright and vibrant life with the cold reality of her current existence. She was a ghost in her own life, fading into the shadows, and yet the weight of her pain anchored her there, refusing to let her slip away. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate. Evelyn's heart raced as she pressed against the wall, praying for the darkness to swallow her whole. The shadows danced, but a figure stepped into the faint light, scanning the room. It was a man, tall and sturdy, his eyes sharp yet searching. "Hey," he called out, voice steady. Evelyn's instincts screamed at her to run, but fear locked her feet in place. She croaked, the words barely escaping her lips. "I'm Jake," he said, not stepping closer but remaining in that small pool of light, hands raised, showing he meant no harm. "Help." The word hung in the air, heavy with desperation. She needed it more than she wanted to admit, but trust was a luxury she could hardly afford, especially with so much at stake. She asked, suspicion lacing her voice. "I know you're hiding. I know you're scared, but I also know how to get out of this mess," he said, his tone turning serious. Evelyn's heart raced. She studied him closely, searching for deception, and yet his gaze held sincerity. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like the world has turned its back on you," he replied, leaning slightly as if trying to connect. For a moment, her fear battled against that flicker of hope, and then just like that, a decision formed. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted, her voice trembling as she stepped out of the shadows, the weight of indecision lifting. "Let's get you out of here," Jake said, offering his hand, a lifeline reaching into her stormy sea of fear. Evelyn took it, and the warmth that traveled up her arm felt like a spark igniting the remnants of her spirit. Together, they stepped out of the abandoned building and back into the pulsating life of the city. Rain mixed with the distant sounds of music, laughter, and life, a vivid reminder of the world she was so desperately trying to escape. She asked as they maneuvered through the streets. "To my place," he said, keeping his voice low, but the determination in his eyes shone bright. As they moved through the winding alleys, Evelyn felt a mix of fear and excitement. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, invigorating her spirit for the first time in a long while. She glanced at Jake, an ally, or was he simply a stranger binding her closer to danger? The apartment they arrived at was modest, a small room cluttered with stacks of books, sketches, and what appeared to be a makeshift bed in the corner. But it felt safe, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. "This is home for now," he said, ushering her in. Evelyn set her bag down, feeling a surge of uncertainty. Jake leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "First we wait, then we figure out your next move," she repeated, confusion clouding her thoughts. "It means you need to stop being the girl with no name," he explained. "You're more than that." Tension settled in the room, and as Evelyn hesitated, Jake's eyes held her steady. There was something in the way he looked at her, an understanding, a connection that ignited a flicker of strength she thought she'd lost. So she began to tell him, the words flowing like old ink returning to life. She spoke of the party, the laughter that turned to chaos, of feelings pent up until they shattered in an instant. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she exclaimed, urgency rising in her voice. "I believe you," Jake said softly. "But to prove it, you need to name a real one." The girl with no name can't fight back. Evelyn felt the weight of his words seep into her soul. "I've always loved my name, Evelyn. It's part of who I am," she said quietly, the syllables laced with unspoken determination. "Then that's who you are," he declared, resolve in his eyes. With her name spoken back into existence, Evelyn felt a jolt of power rush through her. She was no longer just a rumor hiding in the shadows. She was Evelyn, the girl ready to take back her life, one piece at a time. Days turned into a blur of conversations, planning, and sketching. Evelyn poured her pain onto the pages of her sketchbook, each line representing the turmoil that had once consumed her. She drew images of herself, confronting the darkness that had taken root inside her, and as she sketched, she felt the shadows unfurl. The more she shared with Jake, the deeper their bond grew. He became her confidant, her strength, and she learned to let him in, to trust again despite the circumstances. With every passing moment, they plotted and planned, writing her story, every word a brushstroke painting a future filled with hope. But as she began to feel stronger, the haunting thoughts returned. She whispered one night, her voice shaking as she clutched a sketch of a vibrant sunrise, symbolizing a new beginning. "Then we adapt. We figure it out," Jake said confidently. "You're not alone in this, Evelyn." Feeling emboldened by his words, she took a deep breath and nodded. One rainy evening, they gathered their evidence and made their way back to the police station. Every heartbeat felt like a thunderclap, a reminder of the storm they were walking into. Evelyn paused just outside the door. "Then we show them your truth," he said. "You have to own what happened." Steeling herself, Evelyn stepped into the station, her stomach churning. As they approached the front desk, she recognized the officer on duty, the same one who had tried to question her after the incident. He asked, looking up from his paperwork. "I want to report what really happened at the party," she said, her words steady. The officer studied her for a moment, then gestured for her to follow him to an interview room. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, and the sterile environment was stifling. Evelyn took a seat, heart racing as she began to recount every detail of that fateful night. Jake sat outside the door, an anchor in the chaos swirling within her. As she spoke, she could feel the tension in the air shift. Each word unveiled the truth, a layer of her story that had been hidden away and now spilled forth. "I didn't touch her. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she pleaded, the emotion in her voice spilling out like an unbroken dam. "I was scared, and in that moment everything just..." The officer listened intently, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Thank you for coming in, Evelyn," he said when she finished. As she left the station, relief swept over her, but the battle was far from over. With each passing day, the investigation continued, and Evelyn felt the weight of uncertainty still pressing down on her. But Jake remained by her side, his unwavering belief in her becoming a fortress around her. They strategized, gathered support from the community, and began to rebuild her confidence. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation into her case took a turn. Calls for witness statements led to more individuals coming forward. Each person painted a more complete picture of that chaotic night, a picture that showed Evelyn wasn't the monster others had painted her to be. Slowly, but surely, the allegations began to crumble. With each new testimony, Evelyn felt herself rising above the shadows. With Jake guiding her, she took leaps of faith, attending community meetings and sharing her experience, which helped others who had faced similar darkness. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in a park sketching the blossoming flowers around them, Evelyn turned to Jake. "What if this all leads to nothing?" He looked at her, determination shining in his eyes. "Then we keep fighting. You're not alone anymore, and they can't take your voice away. You've become stronger, Evelyn." That evening, while reviewing her sketches, a sense of warmth washed over her as the sun dipped below the horizon. Looking at her art, she saw not just the pain but also the beauty of transformation. Through the struggle, she had learned to embrace her identity, to evolve from the girl with no name into someone proud to stand tall. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. As she walked into the courthouse, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. A collective breath echoed through the crowded room, drawing her focus inward. Evelyn took her place at the front, her heart racing, but there was a newfound strength within her. She was more than just a name. She was a survivor, an artist recounting her truth. As the proceedings began, she witnessed the weight of what it meant to reclaim her life, every participant bearing witness to not just her story but the very essence of humanity itself. In the end, the judge's decision echoed through the room, a final confirmation that today would be a new chapter, a chapter of freedom, of hope and renewal. When she stepped outside, the sunlight enveloped her like a warm embrace, a release from the shadows that had once dominated her life. Standing beside Jake, a mixture of relief and exhilaration coursed through her veins. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered, emotion cracking her voice. "I always knew you had it in you," he replied, a proud smile illuminating his face. In that moment, as the world unfolded before her, Evelyn felt unstoppable, a mosaic of experiences, paint splatters and struggles, all carefully crafted into a beautiful masterpiece. She was no longer the girl with no name, but a woman who stood firm in the face of adversity, a testament to resilience and the power of reclaiming one's identity. Together, they walked into the future, hand in hand, a vibrant canvas waiting to be created anew. She was pinned against the cold, hard wall of a dimly lit alley, heart racing, breath shallow. The rain poured down, drenching her hair and clothes, but all she felt was the sweat of panic seeping into her skin. Evelyn was the girl with no name, a ghost wandering the desperate corners of a city that felt both familiar and terrifyingly hostile. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, getting closer, and she could almost taste the adrenaline surging through her veins. Just a week prior, Evelyn was an ordinary college student, a painter with dreams bursting at the seams. She'd spent her life filling canvases with swirling colors and vivid stories. But one bad choice, a party, an argument, a single punch had turned her life upside down. The headline had screamed, and suddenly she was not just Evelyn anymore. She was a fugitive, a suspect in a crime she never intended to commit. Now hiding in the shadows, she was haunted by her own reflection, the girl who had made a mistake, who had lost everything, including her name. The rain felt like a comfort, washing away the memories as she tried to focus on the present. But as the sirens swelled closer, dread seeped in. How long could she keep running? That unsettling question clawed at her insides. Then she heard them footsteps approaching from the other end of the alley. She pressed herself harder against the wall, spine scraping against the rough surface. Her stomach knotted, she had to disappear. And just when she thought she was done for, a strong hand gripped her arm. A voice urged, low and firm. Before Evelyn could protest, she was yanked into a narrow gap between two buildings. The world around her blurred into a frenzy of rain and noise as she stumbled into the dark. She gasped, breathless and panicked. "Don't speak. Just stay quiet," he replied, his voice deep and commanding. She peered into the shadows, barely able to make out his features, but the intensity of his gaze felt like a lifeline thrown into her chaotic storm. They waited, hearts racing, until the footfalls passed. After what felt like an eternity, the man finally turned to her. "I'm Jake. Trust." The very word felt foreign. "Help, because I've been there. I know what it's like to be hunted," he said, his voice a rough whisper. "You can't keep hiding forever." Evelyn's instincts screamed for her to run, to escape this stranger, but something in his eyes urged her to stay. Something inside her clung to that flicker of hope, the desperate longing to reclaim her life. She managed to ask, still wary, "Just your trust, and a name," he said matter-of-factly. She echoed, confused. "You're not just the girl with no name. You were Evelyn once, and you can be her again. Take ownership," he insisted, a spark igniting in his expression. Evelyn took a shuddering breath, realizing the truth of his words. She had forgotten what it meant to be her own person. "Evelyn," she whispered, the name tasting like both freedom and chains. "Good. Then let's get you out of here, Evelyn," Jake said as he stepped into the rain-soaked night. Together, they moved through the streets, ducking into small, shadowy corners, avoiding the bustling crowds that seemed to ignore them. With every step, Evelyn felt a rush of uncertainty, mingling with an exhilarating sense of purpose. For the first time in days, she wasn't alone. Eventually, Jake led her to a small cafe tucked away in a quieter part of town. The smell of coffee enveloped them like a warm blanket as they sat in a booth in the back. "We'll lay low here for now," Jake said, clearly familiar with the surroundings. Evelyn nodded, her heart racing. It felt strange to open up, to share the details of her life, the laughter that turned to chaos, the arguments that had spiraled out of control. "I never meant for any of it to happen," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. Jake listened intently, a valuable anchor in her storm. "You need to let it out, Evelyn." With each detail she shared, Evelyn felt the tension in her chest lifting. The weight of shame began to dissipate, replaced by a determination she'd thought lost forever. The memories became a canvas, each stroke revealing a little more of who she was, a girl searching for a way back to herself. As the night wore on, they moved deeper into her tale. Between sips of coffee, she shared her plans, her dreams, her fears, and the uncertainties of the future. She whispered, anxiety clawing at her throat. "I won't let them." "You're more than that," Jake said confidently. "Telling your story is a step toward regaining control." Evelyn felt a flicker of hope ignite in her chest. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was starting to fight for her life, for her name, and for her future. Days turned into a blur of planning and preparation. With Jake's guidance, Evelyn began to reclaim her identity. They connected with community organizations, gathered evidence, and reached out to witnesses who could support her account. Each piece felt like a brushstroke painting a brighter picture of her past. But while she was out there fighting, the dark reality crept in again. One rainy evening after a long day of strategizing, Jake turned to her, seriousness etched on his face. "You have to be prepared, Evelyn, if the police catch up to you." An uneasy feeling twisted in her gut. "Then we'll make them. But we have to stay one step ahead." His ominous words reverberated in her mind, a constant reminder of the stakes she faced. One dark and stormy night, they received a tip-off about someone who had been at the party, someone who could corroborate Evelyn's side of the story. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, an opportunity to change everything. They had to act quickly. "Let's go now," Jake urged, his eyes filled with urgency. Evelyn nodded, the weight of her past pressing on her shoulders, but the flicker of determination lit her way. They navigated through the rain-slicked streets, each step echoing with purpose. The darkness closed in around them, but she pressed on, heart beating steadily in time with her footsteps. As they entered the dimly lit bar where the witness hung out, the atmosphere shifted into one of uncertainty and unpredictability. Evelyn asked, anxiety creeping back in. "Yeah, just stay close to me," Jake replied, scanning the room before approaching a familiar face. It was a young woman flanked by a group of friends. "Rachel," Jake said with a nod, his tone friendly. Rachel turned, initially confused, but when her gaze landed on Evelyn, surprise turned to recognition. "Evelyn, this is important," Jake interjected. As they moved to a more secluded booth, Evelyn's heart raced. The weight of the conversation ahead felt like an avalanche ready to break free. She braced herself, knowing this could be the tipping point in her fight against the tides of accusation. "Listen, I need you to understand how serious this is," Jake began, his voice urgent. "Evelyn isn't who they say she is." Rachel met Evelyn's gaze, her expression softening. "I get it. You were just caught in a terrible situation." Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she recounted the events of that night, detailing how things had spiraled beyond her control. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, emotions rolling over her like waves. "I just—" Rachel listened intently, nodding slowly as Evelyn shared the details until the weight of her confession felt lighter, almost like a release. "I believe you," Rachel said finally. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The door swung open and a couple of officers stepped in, scanning the room with hawkish precision. The sight sent a jolt of panic through Evelyn's system, and she felt frozen in place. Jake exclaimed, urgency lacing his voice as he grabbed her arm. They bolted toward the exit, but the officers were quick, already making their way toward them. "Evelyn Jones!" One of the officers shouted, and Evelyn's heart dropped. Jake yelled, and they tucked back into the crowd as chaos erupted. Evelyn's world spun around her as adrenaline coursed through her veins. They pushed through the bar, weaving in and out of people, limbs tangling together in a frantic dance for freedom. But it was too late. She could hear the officers calling for backup, urging others to join the chase. The noise grew louder, the panic surrounding her blurring her vision. Would this be the end? Would she be dragged back into the darkness? Just as they reached the exit, she felt a firm grip on her shoulder, pulling her back and spinning her around. It was one of the officers, face hard with determination. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to protest, to plead, but Jake stepped in front of her, a barrier of strength. "Wait," he said, voice urgent. But the officer took one look at the young woman before him, eyes narrowing. "No," Evelyn shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the noise of the bar. Fear gripped her heart, constricting it tightly. She had worked so hard to reclaim her life, and now it was about to unravel before her eyes. The bright future she had envisioned seemed further away than ever. And just as she began to lose hope, she felt Jake's hand grip hers tightly, their fingers intertwining. "I won't let them take you without a fight," he said fiercely. Just then, the lights in the bar flickered and dimmed. She heard shouting and chaos, but through the turmoil she saw something sharp and bright, a sliver of hope glimmering in the darkness. Jake urged, leading her toward a back exit as the commotion erupted around them. They sprinted outside into the rain, escaping the chaos of clinking glasses and flashing lights. The weight of the world pressed heavily on Evelyn's shoulders as they dashed through the downpour, but as she glanced up at Jake, determination fueled her spirit once more. "This isn't over," he said, his voice steady against the raging storm. With adrenaline pumping through her veins, Evelyn held onto that promise, feeling empowered by the fight ahead. But even as they dashed into the night, uncertainty loomed heavily, a storm on the horizon waiting to crash down upon them. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, one thought echoed in her mind. No matter what happened next, she would not be the girl with no name. She would fight to reclaim who she was. She would confront the shadows, and as she did, she felt that near unstoppable power beginning to rise within her again. But just as they turned the corner, Evelyn's heart sank. There was a blockade ahead. Police cars, flashing lights cutting through the darkness, and officers waiting, and she realized she was about to be trapped, caught in a web she desperately sought to escape. Fear gripped her again, but Jake squeezed her hand, urging her forward. "Trust me," he said, his voice unwavering. With every step, she knew that whatever happened next would define her future, and she was ready to face it, even if the storm howled their names through the night.